Welcome again to Running Free Live. I'm Denise Erickson and I'm co-founder of Media Mentors, and we bring you this session with the fantastic support of Film Victoria and ACMI. Tonight, what can I say? We've got the heroes in my mind of our screen production industry at the moment. And I actually feel like a bit of a choir master here. I've got, 9 people and I'm sort of waiting to conduct them in this discussion tonight. But first of all, I'm going to introduce them and I'm going to get them to give you all a wave so you can work out who they are. Caroline Pitchers from Screen Victoria, Film Victoria. God, I'm going mad already. Okay, Sally Kaplan, Screen Australia. Gwynia Brunston from Screen New South Wales. Thank you. Alex Thankston from Screen Tas. Kate Crozer from SA Film. Kylie Munich from Screen Queensland. Jenny Hughes from Territory Screen. Monica Penders from Screen Canberra. And way over in the west, looking like a man ready to fly his plane, is Willie Rowe from Screen West. I actually feel like a game show host. This is so awesome. Just to let you know that after this main panel discussion has finished, we are going to put these people into different Zoom rooms so you can drill down a bit on the issues that we've been discussing tonight. Because people have said I'm slightly nuts to have 9 people on a panel, but hey, I asked and I got, and I'm not complaining. But obviously, we are going to skim over some things that people might think are more important than others. So what the hell has happened to us, really? I mean, it is COVID-19. It's kicked our industry in the gut. And as I said, I genuinely believe that it's the funding bodies that have done so much work to help us out. And I'm delighted that they're talking to us here tonight. And of course, the other major issue is Black Lives Matter, which again has put diversity front and center of discussions. And we will be talking about that briefly later. But the good news is that there are green shoots of emerging production. So we're going to talk tonight about where we're at now, what's changed as a result of what's happened during COVID so far. And God knows in Victoria, we know it's not over yet. And what's the way ahead? Let's sort of polish off some of our looking glasses and see whether or not we can actually, crystal balls actually, and see where we go from here. I've done all my research with these guys, and I guess what I've overwhelmingly heard is that it could have been worse in terms of production when COVID happened. There was stories of delays rather than cancellations. But Gwynia, in brief, I know that you guys did a survey of our industry in your state, New South Wales, and I'd just like to remind people briefly that people have been hurting in this business. It's not our imagination. So can you just give us a brief summary before we get underway of what your survey found?
Sure. I guess a lot of freelancers filled in the survey, which was great. Sadly, 91% of them reported severe job losses. Average losses of over $20,000 each. In total, from the we had about 600 responses to the survey, about $50 million in losses that people were predicting, and that was really between March, April, and September. Obviously, kind of with everything still evolving, that's likely to be exacerbated. I think we'll probably do resurvey in the next 6 weeks or so, just to kind of look at what's going to happen from now to the end of the year, because I think things will have changed substantially. But the industry was devastated and feeling devastated, certainly in April this year. And I think, we all shared that across the country.
Does anybody else want to add in anything from that in particular from your individual states? Or okay, Kylie, go for it.
We also did a survey about at a similar time and had to think about 560 responses in Queensland. And just to echo what Gwynia and New South Wales learned, it was quite depressing back at the beginning of COVID to realise the scale of what was happening. And as we all know, there are just so many freelancers in our industry. So this was prior to JobKeeper being announced, but they were already aware of what the restrictions would be around that and therefore their ability to earn income. So the mental health issues were huge, and just being able to give people any kind of optimism and hope that the industry would regain its momentum was certainly something we were seeing.
Anything else?
Yeah, and in Western Australia, you know, like my colleagues on the East Coast, we too did a survey which was very, very well subscribed. But what it did, and it really did highlight the immediate and longer term impact potential, which we've seen realised. But what it did is it galvanised us into action to move really, really quickly to put in place programs to mitigate this. And I think, you know, to a person around the country, everybody moved really, really quickly because they recognised it was a fundamental issue that had to be addressed. And so, you know, I mean, I think credit to everyone in every screen agency who just moved so quickly without fear or favour, I think.
Carolyn, go for it.
What I thought was fantastic by all of us as screen agencies is it immediately brought us together. It immediately brought us together to unify as a country without borders, to set an agenda for the immediate support of our industry and to bring our learnings together and actually be more collegiate than I think we ever have been, to work very closely with Screen Australia and devise programs that were complementary both nationally and statewide.
I've certainly noticed that in talking to you all, because you've all been telling me about the weekly and fortnightly meetings. So I sort of feel like I'm gate crashing a bit of a private party, because you guys do this all the time, which is brilliant for producers to know, because it's stuff that we don't get to hear about. I'm going to ask, the other thing that brought you all together too, of course, was the COVID production plan, which is an extraordinary piece of work. However many, I think it was 48 pages or 83 pages. Please check out the websites, the online, that are all carrying the plan. But that was an extraordinary piece of work, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And we should also give great credit to AFTRS, who's really led that process. I mean, we had all talked about it as screen agencies as being integral to getting production up and going again, which, as we all recognise, was kind of the number one aim that we were all working towards. And so that particular piece of work, the protocols, the COVID safe protocols, were really the sort of the launching pad for producers being able to think about, you know, restarting production or starting new production. And then I suppose the other thing that we've done in South Australia is we were hearing from producers that the protocols were the first step, but financiers and investors were requiring each production to develop their own risk management plan, which is absolutely, you know, crucial to enabling a safe workplace. But producers don't really have a great amount of experience in that field. You know, this was a completely new skill set for most producers. So for us, we sort of recognise we need to
the doodle,
producers developed a risk assessment tool, and that's available for all producers. So that's on our website that anyone can access.
Okay, there's two things that I'll say at the front here. One of them is we put up all of the web addresses of each of the agencies, because, you know, I've been looking through them in the last couple of weeks, and my God, they're chock full of brilliant information. And you know what that means? You don't have to send an email asking what this is about or what that's about, because if you look, you'll find it. It's brilliant. And the second thing I'd say is that we're taking questions of our guests tonight by mobile phone, because it's just so much quicker and easier when we're in lockdown here in Victoria. The number is 0468 328 374. They'll come through to me and I'll feed them through as the discussion unfolds. I believe the number's up on YouTube for you now. Now, at 5:33 tonight, this news release came through from Film Victoria. And I'm going to start with that as we discuss what's happening, because I tell you what, I squealed just a little bit when I read it, Caro, because we didn't know if we were going to be in production here in Victoria. I think it's important that people do know that we are. So what's the latest?
Thanks, Denise. Well, let me tell you, it's not easy to get onto the stay open list when you're in stage 4 lockdown. It takes a lot of work. And the pre-work that we did as a group of screen agencies was a key foundation to enabling physical production to stay shooting throughout this next 6-week period. So without that, we would not have been in this same position. So what it does mean is that productions like Wentworth, like Neighbours, we've got a Netflix original shooting at the moment that has 4 days to go. They can operate and shoot in a closed set environment, which we've also got definitions for, and continue to operate over these 6 weeks. Absolutely essential. It could have been unbelievably devastating to our industry, and we are incredibly conscious of the first goal for our state. The first goal for our state is to get these number of infections down. So we want to do this as responsibly as we possibly can, and that's why our communication needs to be so detailed, and that we need to dovetail into all of the state-based policies around the right type of administration, the right types of risk policies, the right type of COVID safe practices. And so we've been working very closely with productions so that they know how to do this. We've been very pleased that there have been resilient sectors also within the industry. To name those are digital games, visual effects, animation, some forms of post-production. So the post-production can also continue on the basis of whatever has been in action prior to these 6 weeks can continue. It does exclude television commercial production. It excludes student film and other content production, and it excludes corporate videos, but it does include television drama, television light entertainment, feature film, and documentaries.
Oh, I tell you, that was such good news when I read that today, and it means that we can join the other states who are also in production. I thought for a minute I'd just sort of talk about some of the productions that are in place, and I want people to join in on this. But I've got to start with Grania because she told me this awesome story about the Children of the Corn. Now, I thought it was one of the most unusual stories to bring to the table tonight, of a damn fine reason for a production to happen. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I think you're talking about the crops.
Oh, yes,
so
I am.
The production had been growing a field of corn in northwestern Sydney in Richmond. It was ripe, it was ready to go. The US actors were about to come out of quarantine, and then the lockdown happened. So they had to pivot very quickly, develop COVID safe plans and guidelines for the production, put all of the crew into quarantine, and make a plan to keep everybody in quarantine for, they were planning on maybe 3 or 4 weeks of shooting to use this field of corn before it all went rotten. Kids running and screaming through the corn, it's all good, do all the outdoor stuff. And then that worked, nobody got sick, everybody was safe, so they continued to shoot through the whole thing, either in Richmond or in regional New South Wales, and got the film finished, which was all credit to them, really. And the corn was good.
Thank God for that. It made my week. What other stories of productions happening? I know that pretty much every state has got something sort of on its way, and federally as well, I'm sure. But who wants to go next about what's happening in your state?
So I just finished with, we've got a few TV dramas, local TV dramas that have started shooting this week. So Wakefield, which is Jungle Entertainment, closed down mid-March, halfway through their shooting. They had some international cast who went home. They're all back, and they started shooting this week on Monday, and they've had a really good week for their first week. So they've got, 5 weeks of filming, and they're back in the swing of it, which is brilliant. Eden, which is Every Cloud, Deb Cox and Fiona Eager up in Byron Bay. They're shooting, or they had their first week this week. We've also got 9 Perfect Strangers, which is Made Up Stories. Start shooting on Monday, again in Byron in the Northern Rivers area. And a number of other things that are back. Shang-Chi, the Marvel film that's at Fox Studios, is also back now as well. Everybody went home. They've all just recently come back out of quarantine and ready to go.
Woohoo! Kylie, because up in Queens, oh yes, Willie, I'll come to you next, promise, won't be a minute. Kylie, I think the news today was, I wrote it down that something was starting today. I know, Harrow, I was reading about that today, but you've got quite a few things happening up there too.
Yeah, Harrow's season 3 started back this week at the beginning of the week, and they've told me everything's gone really well. They actually only have a few more days to go because they were so close to finishing prior to lockdown. So we're thrilled for them. We have Jonathan Schiff's Bureau of Magical Things, season 2, was able to start again several weeks ago on the Gold Coast. They put so much work into their COVID safe plan and have reported that as well things are going terrifically well on set. I've seen photos of crew masked up, and apparently everyone is patient and respectful, and which has just been brilliant news. We also had a small feature film shoot up in Far North Queensland in Cairns called This Little Love of Mine, and they've finished their shoot and actually have moved on to another one called Kidnapped in Paradise, which is brilliant because they're creating work for us in Far North Queensland, which is really one of the areas that we're helping to grow the industry in. And of course, everyone wants to know what's happening with Elvis.
Yes, I was about to ask you.
Not yet, but they're certainly working towards getting back. So, sorry, I could hear someone in the background there. Maybe it was Elvis. I was
It might have been, I'm coming for you in August, he'd say.
In his blue suede shoes.
Yeah, that's a huge production for our state. So we've been working really closely with Queensland Health and other branches of government to help get that production rolling again.
Great. And Willie, I promise you, it's your turn now.
Thanks, Denise. And, you know, Western Australia was probably in the position where we didn't have any active drama production underway when COVID hit. So the impact on ongoing production wasn't immediate. But we've seen that we've had our documentary sector has continued to produce all the way through, obviously, in line with the appropriate safeguards. But it's really quite exciting now coming out the other side that we've got. We're going to have we've got a documentary shooting at the moment. We've got a long form starting in hopefully the next 2 or 3 weeks. A couple of feature films are on the go, and we'll be able to announce that more fully in the next couple of weeks. But it's looking encouraging in Western Australia. As I say, green shoots, but they're solid green shoots, and it's one of the I think, along with everyone else around the country, one of the challenges that we've had with our hard border closures is getting people in, particularly to shoot long form. But we're seeing that people are now being allowed to come into Western Australia, which is really quite exciting. So getting production underway is a priority for us, and we're really encouraged by what we're going to see in the next 6 months.
Hey, you've got aftertaste, haven't you? Oh, sorry, Sally, promise.
No, I was just going to say that on the subject of green shoots, it has been really heartening to see how we've all come together as an industry, and particularly the producers have been so agile and innovative, and we've seen more COVID plans than I really want to see in my life. But they've been, on the whole, they've been superb. They understand that the protocols on the website are general, everything is bespoke, and they've come up with some amazing plans. I don't think we've been disappointed at all, and I would particularly commend Every Cloud who's doing Eden, whose plan was just superb, and everybody's just pivoted. And I know other people, the online creators have been great. You've probably heard about the program called Cancelled. A director called Luke Eve went to Spain to marry his fiance, and of course they got in lockdown and they were stuck in a flat with his mother, who I'm sure is a very lovely lady, but it's testing anybody. And they decided to make something of it, and they released it on Facebook. And it was done as cheap as chips on a mobile phone, and it's had 10 million views, which is fantastic. And so it's really great to see some of the innovation that's come out of this, and also the fact that producers have been so responsible in our experience anyway, and just really.
And Sally, what about Retrograde as well? The fast turnaround of that on ABC.
That Home Alone Together, it's been really good to see. And again, green shoots, like Willie was saying, about 90% of our documentaries are still going, and most of the animations a bit slower than normal. and they need some extra money to help them, but they've all kept going. So it's been very heartening.
And Kate, you've got Aftertaste.
We do, yes. Aftertaste, a new ABC comedy series from Closer Productions, who are a South Australian production company. So it's wonderful to be able to shepherd in, a homegrown project first and foremost. We do have quite a few productions lining up to follow, and I'm sure everyone else is in the same boat, but our door is getting banged down, with people looking to come and shoot for, international production. There's a lot of interest because Australia is a very safe place right now. So that is fantastic. But what I am noticing, and I think, whilst it's great to point out the fantastic work that producers are doing, I just think it's also important to note that what I'm noticing, and I'm sure other people as well, is just the pressure that is on producers. Like, I have had really seasoned, experienced producers almost in tears, like they are under so much pressure to get these productions going, and they are dealing with so much uncertainty. And it is, incredibly difficult time. So I think, what Screen Australia has done with announcing the additional funds for COVID compliance, I suppose, productions, and we're certainly taking the same approach at the SAFC, but that is just one sort of pressure that we, I suppose, as agencies can help to lift from the shoulders of producers as they're moving forward.
I think one of the things that you were saying, Sally, when I spoke to you, it's not actually extra funding, is it? You've sort of raided other budgets, is that right, with the various funds?
We don't have any extra money. We did the Premium Plus Fund, which was to help money get out to the sector as quickly as possible, so that in the hiatus their projects could be more production ready, and we were encouraging them to bring in HODs earlier, so that it wasn't just money going to producers, writers and directors. We've reallocated, but we have noticed, I'm sure others have, that for various, probably obvious reasons, we're getting less production investment applications. Most of the TV have got stuff backed up and the quotas have gone, so we're not seeing as much TV. So there's money there. We don't know how much, but we're reallocating until we're in deep trouble, and then we'll stop.
Yeah. And I know that some of the other agencies, you've sort of redistributed funding too into much more development. I think that's a general thing. Alex, what's the situation in TAS?
We were in a bizarre space, Denise, actually. We were in a period where we had a lot of stuff in post and we had a lot of animation. We didn't actually have anything in production, so nothing got shut down. Our first production back will be The Tailings, a little SBS drama, 6x10 and 1x60 minute. That's looking at spring or later in the year, pending public health advice, we have to say that. But yeah, we were quite lucky because we had stuff like, I picked this background deliberately, that's Aussie Lobstermen, which is kind of the perfect COVID safe project because it's 2 fishers and 1 camera person on a boat, and having that in 6 different pods. And the doco actually does cover the period that COVID was initially a problem. So you can see the impact of the pandemic in real time.
I thought you just put that up to make us all jealous of the amazing bloody lobsters and crayfish you've got.
No,
I'm jealous, just for the record. But sorry, I interrupted. You were saying.
No, that's fine. But beyond that, I mean, our pivoting point very quickly was realizing that while we were in a period where we didn't have any production that was about to go, we didn't have any production that was going to be shut down, but like everybody, we realized very quickly we just need to get money in people's pockets. So the government very kindly for us provided this, they came up with this really interesting idea of a $500,000 art screen digital production fund, which was aimed at getting the arts sector and the filmmaking sector to work together on a thing, whatever that thing is, and providing quite reasonably small grants, up to 50K for companies, to do a thing that could be delivered digitally in a world where people can't see things in person. And I think that when we're talking about green shoots, that program for us was a real eye-opener, because it showed that there is a whole bunch of things that aren't what we normally do. They're not TV dramas, they're not documentaries, they're not animations, they're something else. And it really works to see the creativity and the technical expertise coming together to come up with whatever that is, in a world where our traditional distribution channels at best are under pressure and at worst are in serious trouble.
I want to talk to Monica and Jenny in a minute too, but I think, like, before we sort of move into, you know, what's changed as a result and what's happening, you know, in the future, like with big productions like Mavericks going into the territories, for example, I did want to talk a little bit about, obviously, the location funding, 400 million government money over the next 7 years. Sally, are you able to give any clarity on where you're at? Or I know that, you know, you probably can't, but I'm going to ask.
I can't, because I don't know is the honest answer. It wasn't something, whilst we've had a lot of people congratulating us on getting that, it wasn't really us. It just happened, so, which was great, but you know, it wasn't, we can't, obviously as government, we can't lobby government, but we weren't expecting it. We had heard that they might be doing something, and we're encouraging, not lobbying, but I can't tell you much more than.
But you'll be administering it, is that right?
Arts and Comms will administer it, the federal government of Arts and Communications.
Okay, cool.
We don't do the location offset or the PDV offset, so that will be
And so,
arts.
yeah.
Well,
so really what happened there, Denise, is you've got a 16.5% locations offset, and traditionally over the last few years it was topped up with 140 million to make that a 30% locations rebate. So that money essentially got spent probably in half the time than they had expected because of the popularity of Australia as a destination for filmmaking. So there are quite a number of projects that got the benefit of that, you know, Shang-Chi and the Marvel projects, Clickbait, possibly Elvis, that might have got the 40%, Kylie, I'm not sure, Shantaram. So a number of projects actually benefited from that. And then clearly, as a destination for filming, Australia is very, very capable and it's successful, and we want to have a nice balance within the ecosystem of really robust and strong good international production to lift our capability and capacity as a screen agency, sorry, as a screen industry. And so that we estimate that 30% equivalent, which is what that 400 million will go to do, is to lift our capacity as an industry to host those international productions and take the benefit from that.
Is that, thank you for explaining that, because I got that a bit wrong. My reading let me down. But is that like good for the local industry, or is it just like, I can imagine it's good for local, you know, crew, but is that good news for local films as well, or is it just for international?
Location offset is traditionally just for international, but if you look at the Netflix original Clickbait, that is an original Victorian creation by Tony Ayres. Tony Ayres has been able to develop a very successfully Matchbox Pictures with his partners. He now has his own shingle and an output deal with NBCU, and he has benefited from the locations offset to create Clickbait. So I think there's some fluidity in the policies that the federal government has across the board. So it's not necessarily so black and white. What we're really aiming to achieve as we grow as an industry, and let's just face it, within 4 years, the global screen production industry is going to be worth over $850 billion just in content production, right? It's huge in Australian dollars. We've got to get ourselves a piece of that economic growth. And we do that in both an export, so creating great local productions that have got global audiences to them and export our amazing creative content, as well as being a destination for screen excellence in what we make here as crews, as service businesses, the whole lot, so that we've got a really robust and resilient industry.
Does anybody else thank you, Caro. Does anybody else want to join in this? Are there any issues around that fund for you guys, or, any take on that you want to share? Willie, and we'll go you first.
I'll just briefly, one of the challenges that we have in Western Australia is we don't have a studio. And so that precludes a lot of those international, and I'm seeing Monica's put a hand up for that, and I'm thinking Jenny's the same, and Alex, of course, that precludes us attracting those larger international projects into Western Australia and elsewhere in the country. So accessing the location incentive is challenging for us, but it was interesting from Caro's perspective. I think that there's opportunity there, and we've got to just look at how we do it and be a bit more creative. From not being able to access the previous one, that there's opportunity now to go in there, and we're very, very bullish on being able to get in there and access the fund. $400 million. If we get 10% of that into Western Australia, that would make a huge difference.
And Willie,
I'd like to add on, Willie.
I'm just going to go to Jenny for a minute because I haven't heard it all from her yet.
I think we're in the same position. I mean, obviously with WA and Tassie and Canberra and with not having a studio, but I still think that there's ways that we can compete. And I think it's a significant opportunity that I think that we should try and compete with that and just see what we can offer. And we're now looking at that just to see how we can actually offer something and really get a piece, as Willie said, a piece of that 400 million. And I think it's really important for our sector as well. We've got people up here that really need work, and we want to keep them in the territory, and that's probably one of our biggest challenges. So I think if we can get more work up here, then we build more capacity, and we keep people in the territory, which is really, really important.
And Mavericks is going to be a huge gig for you too.
Absolutely. Well, look, we were pretty lucky that I think the girls, the Brindle girls, who are the production team behind that, were trying to go into production, before we got to our a build-up season. I mean, we have weather that is really kind of an issue for us. So we have a double whammy. We've got Corona, plus we also have a very kind of hot summer. So we've got to get everything done within a short space of time. But I think it was a good decision to put that off and put that back until February. But I think that's a really great production for us. I think from a couple of different angles. I think from just being able to pull masses of employment, I think in terms of in Alice Springs, of our screen practitioners, but also about, what that will do is change perceptions a bit, and also about what the territory is capable of in terms of a series. And also changing perceptions in terms of what the territory looks like. Yeah. So it's not all sort of period pieces, and it's a contemporary piece, contemporary series, and we're really thrilled with it. Yeah.
Monica, have you got anything you want to come in on with the location?
Yeah. Look, obviously, in the same boat, or so shall I say, studio-less arc as as Western Australia, Northern Territory and Tasmania. And it is something that we're looking at cautiously, because we also know that it comes with a lot of risk, investing into infrastructure. So we're looking at ways in which we can, work with the government here on potentially getting some government-owned asset, hopefully to be able to, convert that into studio space. I think, like Kate was saying, our door is not only being knocked on, it has been gone through with a bulldozer. We have so many inquiries from everywhere, from all over the country, from overseas, and it is disappointing to say to overseas, companies that we don't have studio space. But once again, I think what is great is that has come out of this, and it was something Caro mentioned, and I think I mentioned to you on the phone, Denise, when we talked, is this collegiate kind of atmosphere that we kind of had, but we really do have now within the agencies. And I think, like, Willie offered information up to share information with us on what they found about developing studio space, and I think this, if there was an upside of this COVID situation, it really is the I think we're quite a tight group now, which is great, because first of all, we are Australian. And so it is about building the Australian film industry, and then we can go to get the swords out and fence over the individual ones. But I think it's really
the
important.
fight will come later.
Yeah, exactly. But you know,
Grania,
I love you, but
thanks, Monica. I know Grania and Kate had something to add. So Grania, do you want to go first?
Sure. I guess, you know, to echo what other people are saying, our priority really is the local industry and local stories. And we don't get the international stuff without a strong and robust local industry. They're coming for our world-class crews. They're coming for our facilities. They're coming for the locations. But really it is about being able to do a full service delivery for that kind of thing. And I know a lot of local producers kind of grumble about the amount of money, and it does seem massive, but what that will trigger is $3 billion worth of production. And that money's going to go somewhere in the world. This is a very globally competitive industry, as we all know. And why shouldn't we get a taste of that? And through that, we can get introductions to different studios, to different creatives. They're coming to Australia. When they get here, they love it. They love the lifestyle, they love the cruise, they love working with Australians here. So I think there are opportunities for local industry off the back of those kinds of relationships as well. Okay. But certainly for us, you know, yes, we welcome the international, but local will always be our priority in terms of building those careers and getting Australian stories seen on a world stage. That kind of locally relevant but internationally resonant story is the gold for us.
Kate, did you have anything you want to add, or are we done?
Yeah, great point, Grania. Thank you. I think you speak for all of us on that. But just to go back to Willie and Jenny and Monica's point about studios, what we're actually finding is that because production stage space is in such high demand and short supply in the world, we're actually finding that international productions are very interested in talking to us about other space, like warehouse space, for example. So, you know, we certainly assisted Mortal Kombat with that kind of solution because, you know, yes, we do have a custom built studio in Adelaide, which is a fantastic starting point to the conversation. But often, you know, the high value productions like Mortal Kombat that come in, they do need just such a vast amount of space that, you know, to be able to offer that warehouse space as well, I think is another kind of string to our bow that we have.
We're finding that too, Kate, that we're putting together packages that identify warehouse spaces that can be repurposed really, really quickly. So it's not that not having a dedicated studio is an advantage, but having one would be it would add that extra level of value to what we can offer in Western Australia. But yes, you know, as Monica said, the doors are being kicked down by people interested in coming to Australia / Western Australia / everywhere. And it's just the ability to actually move quickly to try and get those productions into the state and into the country and up and running, as well as we've all noted, supporting the local industry, which is really our bread and butter and where we should be focusing our attention. You know, to Grania's perspective point.
Denise, can I just add in there, like, I think something we have to take into consideration for a lot of the country as well, it wasn't just COVID. I mean, in the ACT and New South Wales and Victoria, and I think Western Australia as well, the bushfires.
Of course.
I mean, you know, like we have been in this, and Queensland too, you know, and then you've had floods. It's just like been since November last year, I think we had smoke so bad in Canberra from about the end of November until the end of February. I had to wear a mask in the house, you know, and so I think we've just gone on from one thing to the other. Yeah. And yes, we can be resilient and all of this, but I think Kylie was talking to the, you know, mental health issues with the filmmakers, and I feel like it's one thing on top of the other, and this is kind of like the crowning glory and the worst. But it's been a tough time.
It has, which leads me quite nicely into something else that I want to talk about. And of course, the other big thing in recent months has been Black Lives Matters. And it would be remiss of me not to talk to you while I have all 9 of you here about, you know, what we've done so well. I mean, look at this group. We've done incredibly well about women, but clearly there's big gaps when it comes to colour, Indigenous Australia, and other, you know, groupings that we now need, I guess, to focus on. So while I know that we could spend 13 hours and still not come up with something, and I wrote something down before that it's sort of like we've got goodwill, but it's such a complex issue. But I'd love to put it out to you, to each of you, and feel free to start off, whoever wants to start off. How do we really genuinely tackle this? I know you've all got some great initiatives. I noticed, Willie, you've got one that's just been announced on VR, I think it was, recently. And there's loads of initiatives to bring talent through. But what do we do, seriously?
I might jump in here, but sorry. Look, I think for us, because obviously our Indigenous communities, it's 30% of our population is Indigenous in the territory. So that is a really key consideration for us. And I think that, you know, we work so closely with them. I mean, it's been great with working with Kate as well when we had our centralised initiatives. So that's been it's really good to work if you can work with across borders, I suppose, as well. And that's been really, really helpful for us, looking at how we can get our Indigenous communities, I think especially, together, and looking at how we can tap into that new talent. And it's been really productive for us. I've found the centralised initiative between us, Kate, I think has been really, really fantastic, and we've discovered some really great talent. I think for us, it's part of our fabric. So we don't really have anything, you know, apart from our centralised initiative. We work so closely with our Indigenous practitioners, and we're really proactive about it. We get on the phone, we talk to people, we really kind of try and, you know, really kind of, I suppose, get into the community, the Indigenous community, filmmaking community, to really kind of look at what they want, what they're doing, try and hook people up. So I think certainly from an Indigenous perspective, given the territory's focus here, I think we can, if you kind of look at maybe being proactive in that regard, and maybe kind of really trying to work much more closely with your Indigenous practitioners, it's kind of starting to work for us now. It's taken a little while, but now we've got some really good people coming through, and now they're kind of getting onto us now, rather than us having to kind of, you know, really go after them. And so it's just a matter of getting to know people a bit more and really being proactive. That's what I've found anyway.
Sally, I'm just going to go to Sally for a minute on Screen Australia, because I think that, you know, you've got that sort of overarching power to be able to make some amazing changes, I guess. I mean, what's your take on the way ahead?
It's problematic. I mean, it's you know, we were very lucky we got an Indigenous department, and I think that's paid a lot of dividends. But it's kind of scary that it was the 25th anniversary last year, and it's still, I mean, it's no criticism of anybody, it takes a long time. I think what we've found most effective for us, being very conscious that we weren't, as an organisation, we weren't as diverse as we should be, is we've had 2 or 3 initiatives. Some of you may know about the Developing the Developer one, which has probably been our most successful, where we were, it was only open to people who are diverse, and we did a 4-day workshop with about 12 to 16 people, and out of that we did the 3rd one last year. We've actually got an external assessor pool now, which actually looks like Australia, not, you know, with very diverse people. We've employed 3 people who now work for the organisation from those, and it's not an answer, but it's we're very keen to fast track it. We did an online thing called Digital Originals, which we did with SBS, which again has given us great relationships and made us seem, you know, not quite so white, and given us an understanding that I'm not sure we entirely had. And I think we're fast tracking diversity and inclusivity, and what we're realising, and, you know, we're doing cultural safety training for ourselves, because you know, I'm being honest, and I'm talking about myself, not everybody at Screen Australia. You know, white people with the best intentions, we don't always get it right, and so we've learnt a lot about how to make something, and collaboration, not just a tick box consultant. So we're doing a lot more to get people involved and find the emerging people and doing attachments and shadowing, and just to help kickstart it, because we don't want to wait 25 years to get diversity fixed.
Thanks. I mean, and I would like to, I'm going to come to Willie next, and then I'm going to go to Kylie. But I do also want to pay tribute to Penny Smallcombe. I mean, she's a full-powered, full-bottle amazing fighter, as you know, and she just leads the way on it. And
she's amazing.
Penny. She's scared. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, I feel so bad, but she bloody does it, and good on her. Willie, you're rewriting your strategic plan around all this at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, we're in the process of redoing our strategic plan. But to your point about Penny, Penny's just a fantastic resource for everyone in every agency around the country, and she works so collaboratively with our team in particular, and she fights hard. So, but we have our Indigenous strategy, which again is being we're working on having that renewed for the next 5 years. So that's being worked on at the moment. But very much like Jenny, our Indigenous practitioners are central to our fabric, particularly regionally. And we find for example, in Broome, there's a fantastic community of practitioners, very, very diverse across the industry and what their capability is. So it's about meaningful support in terms of getting production up. And you know, we're really delighted to be able to support, and we've had, you know, a bit of success with Family Rules and Thalu and Mystery Road 1 and 2 and a range of other productions. But a really interesting one that we've recently done we're doing a project with, it's called Red, and it's for Indigenous female writer directors, and it's a collaboration with us and New Zealand's Brown Sugar and Apple Grunt. And what it'll end up with is 8 West Australian female Indigenous writer directors will make a 10-minute short film. Each will all be incorporated into one production. So it's about enabling, in particular, the writer directors to be able to tell their stories and to tell them authentically. So, and that covers, it's very much part of our diversity approach. So,
right. Kylie, I can see you've been waving at me, and I'm sorry, it took me a minute, but we got there.
Thank you. Look, it's so interesting to hear everyone. So I'm grateful to chime in on Queensland's behalf as well. We have a program run by Doug Watkins that is for Indigenous storytellers and talent in our state. We run a lot of programs throughout the year. We recently announced a collaboration with Leah Purcell and Bain Stewart, First Nations First Drafts, and which is bringing Leah and Bain back to their state of origin and to work with Indigenous storytellers in our state. Of course, we have the mighty Aaron Farso, is the Queenslander, who drives so much.
He's a power generator, that boy. Oh my giddy grandmother.
We're very lucky to have his voice and his talent and his energy. And you know, he's such an advocate for his home region of the Torres Strait, but also, you know, as a director and an actor, he's really doing brilliant things. It would be remiss of me not to mention the Screen Diversity and Inclusion Network, which is not a Screen Queensland initiative, but as you know, it's a national initiative which is actually co-chaired by Screen Queensland's Joe Dillon and Queensland writer broadcaster Benjamin Law. And of course that network has set up the Everyone Project, which is designed to track inclusivity and diversity on productions throughout Australia. So it's something that is very dear to the heart of everyone that works at Screen Queensland. And, you know, I know that Joe and Benjamin are working very hard to bring that project to life.
And I think the Everyone Project is going to be so important because, you know, we're looking at developing a strategy for the next sort of 3 years around really growing the capability of the different, you know, communities, diverse communities in South Australia. And one of the things that we've realised is we just don't have the benchmarking, we just don't have the data of where we're currently at. So how do we measure, you know, how do we track how we're going, and how do we set goals, and how do we measure where we've got to? So I think the Everyone Project is hopefully going to be a really big piece of that puzzle.
Alex, and Carol, did you want to come in there, or are you cool at the moment? No? Oh yes.
Alex.
Yeah, Alex, go for it.
Cara, you can go if you like, because I'm going to segue a little bit if you've got something to follow on direct from that.
Sure. Look, I think that it is an absolute priority for all of us as state agencies to work across the diverse field, every segment of diversity and inclusion, and to do it seriously. I think tokenism is the wrong thing. So we've got to look at systemic change, and in doing that, backing Kate with the right kind of data and potential quotas to measure our progress. Collectively, we really achieved a significant amount for gender equality, and we can reflect on that. We can see where we went over a history of 25 years with the Indigenous unit at Screen Australia. We need to focus on areas of multiculturalism and disability as well, and to actually make sure that in every touch point of what we do as a screen agency, we remove those barriers to entry, and that we are really nurturing talent through their entire careers. And it's a different model from what we've ever looked at before in the traditional white way of working. So it has to be a concerted effort, and I hope that with the collective of state screen agencies in partnership with Screen Australia, we can do something together, because as we bring our resources together, we can achieve a lot more.
I'd love it if I flagged in 6 months from now, we have another panel with you all just to see how you're going on that one. I think it'd be awesome. Well, maybe a year. No, 6 months. Damn it.
There's another side to that too. And I agree absolutely with everything everybody said, but we also, as screen agencies, also have a responsibility to have a level, I think, of policing, of making sure that only people who are able to tell a certain kind of story are able to tell that certain kind of story. And I think to a certain extent, we've had some success collectively as an industry in the Indigenous space on that. And as Caro pointed out, in gender, most recently, and particularly, we've done very well. But I don't think we haven't been as responsible as we should have been collectively in LGBTIQ or in the disability space or in multicultural space. And I think we have work to be done then, and in that space, and we absolutely have a responsibility to do it. So okay. I'd agree with everybody else. The SDIN is fundamental to it as well.
Grania, have you got something that you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I guess I was just going to say we all hold the levers to be able to make those kind of policy changes within the sector, but we don't employ creatives. So this is very much a collaboration with the industry. The only way that we actually made any ground with gender is we had those policy leads by saying, well, if you're coming in with TV drama, you need at least one female key creative. And over the last 5 years, because it's 5 years since we announced our 50-50 by 2020, and all the other screen agencies had their own, names for their programs as well. And I think largely, we certainly have met our target for that. Targets work. But it's about the industry getting on board with this, getting confidence that, of course, women are talented and can tell good stories and can direct and can produce and can write. Who would have thought, indeed. But it doesn't mean that every other underrepresented group in the community should have to queue up behind women to get a go, which I think is, what we're all saying. And it really does take just intention to make it happen. It takes focus, and not just on initiatives, but actually mainstreaming this as well as part of our regular business. Nobody is surprised now when we say, there's no women on this project, go away and find some women key creators to put on this, or there's no money. And, maybe we need a similar mechanism for these other underrepresented parts of the community.
So, because that to me was the logical follow-up, actually, is all right, we've done that for women. And I can't remember who it was, but I was reading something overseas, I think it was in America, PBS maybe, which said if you haven't got diverse people attached to a project, then don't.
I've got them back on. They're still going, so I can just put them back on if you like.
Sorry, I lost that. Somebody.
I think I read that too, Denise. It was no diversity, no commission.
Correct, and I think time for that.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, there's your challenge. No diversity, no commission within 6 months. I'd love to find that happening. Any chance? Anyway, I probably am putting you on the hot seat there, but it'd be so cool if something like that happened, seriously. Now, we've only got a few minutes left. We've got quite a few questions, but I'm going to run this over by 5 minutes, and that means that we'll take a bit less in the Zoom rooms afterwards. But I think this is important. So the last sort of part of the discussion is around the options paper that the government put out, supporting Australian screens, 53 pages of it all, 300 submissions, 300 plus, and it's sort of now being considered. There was 4 models to consider: status quo, minimal change, significant change, and deregulation. And from what I could tell, everybody, all the state agencies went for model 3, which basically the purpose of this model is to establish platform neutral, future facing obligations and incentives that take into account individual platform offerings and audience engagement. What does that mean to stuff like quotas? I mean, does someone want to start off on model 3 and what it means to the things that really matter to the community, like having quotas on things? Who's going to help me out here? Caroline, you're smiling. I'm going to go to you. Damn,
it seems like so long ago that we put these options. So much as time has passed. And Sally, you might want to provide some theoretical context as to what the options paper was all about. But essentially, it is the future of screen in this country. So it is not important, particularly in and around broadcast. So let's just say it is cheaper to import reruns of Friends for a broadcaster and put that on air than it is to develop, shoot and produce Harrow or any other type of Australian production. And Australian stories are essential to our makeup as a community and culture. So if we didn't make free-to-air broadcasters, if we didn't put a quota requirement on free-to-air broadcasters, we would all be speaking in American accents potentially and watching news and sport. So that's our sort of bottom line, basic 101. Does anyone want to add to that?
And I think that's a really important point, Caro, but what it fundamentally says is without that, we may as well all just close up and go home because we're essentially redundant. And that's just not on. That's not part of who we are and what we do and what we're here for and what we're here to support. So
it's not just about free to air, is it? I mean, the streamers and everybody else.
So then you look to the future in the last 24 months or 3 years or even 5 years, the introduction of streaming means we as audiences, as Australian audiences, have more access to streaming services. So now we're going away from free-to-air networks. We don't want to see the advertising. So that's putting free-to-air networks under a revenue, putting them into a bit of a revenue crisis. We're choosing to watch Netflix and Amazon and Stan, and they are not commissioning or they are not incentivised or required, for that matter, to commission or to create Australian drama. So what we're looking to do is equalise the playing field on the basis of saying we still want in Australia to see and consume Australian stories. So option 3, I believe, and Film Victoria believes, is the best step forward, because option 4 was complete deregulation. Option 3 is transformation, and in terms of the quota aspect of that is to ensure that quotas remain with broadcasters. They might be slightly lessened, but they are expanded out to streaming services. Therefore, no matter what you watch, no matter what channel you watch, you can find Australian stories. That's a very basic view. So please, anyone else it's getting late, feel free to add to that element of the options paper.
I totally agree, actually, Cara. I mean, I think it's fundamental to our cultural identity. I mean, we have to see ourselves on screen, because who are we then? And it's absolutely important. So we absolutely supported, option 3, and believe that it should be an even playing field for people with, with their content quotas, and it should be platform agnostic, and that everyone should actually commit to that. I think I totally agree with you. I remember years ago, when I was working in sales, it was really easy. You could just buy in stuff. and there's so much of it, and you would lose that cultural identity. And I think even for us also, really having a look at those children's content. Just imagine if you're bringing up the next generation of children and they're not even seeing themselves on screen. It's really, really important. And, you know, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's, you know, we absolutely supported option 3, and that was my personal view as well, but also screen territories.
Talk about
Cara, I think you did a
incentives.
beautiful, that was a really great way of explaining it. I think you did a great job.
Good.
So who wants to explain the incentives, the offsets?
I was just going to say the other aspect of the paper, it was really to look at all of the systems of federal government support for the screen sector. So that included things like funding Screen Australia, funding the public broadcasters, and it also included the offset mechanism. So, you know, I think the big broad brushstrokes response from the SAFC's point of view, and I think most or all of the other agencies' point of view, was just to provide for the future of the offsets to be platform agnostic, as Jenny said, but also just to be as clear and simple as possible. You know, business and industry needs certainty, and what we've had over the past what has it been now, 13 years since the offsets were introduced, is just, you know, so many different rules and regulations depending on whether you're a feature film, depending on whether you have theatrical distribution, you know, depending on the platform that you release on. There's just too much uncertainty in the current system. So industry has been telling us they really want just a harmonised offset, a simple, clear set of rules that will just provide greater certainty to the international finance market.
I'm taking an executive decision here, which is because I've just found out from ACMI the feed went down for 4 minutes. So, which was a total bugger because it was actually during a good part of our discussion on diversity. So I'm going to summarise that in a minute. But I'm also going to say that we're not going to do the Zoom rooms tonight because we've got so many great questions that I'm just going to keep this going till 8:30. So sorry, everybody, you better put your questions in directly here because in a minute I'm going to go entirely to question. But I think that, you know, the end part of the discussion on diversity very much ended up where we were talking about, I think it was in America, where there was the no diversity, no commission. And I think that, please correct me if I'm wrong around the table here, but I think there was general agreement that that is an option that's absolutely on the table and needs to be considered. Grania, because I'm just going to get you to recap a bit because I think that was the stuff that people missed.
Well, I guess we were talking about the 50-50 by 2020 and our other kind of gender agenda initiatives that all of the screen agencies across the country and Screen Australia has been running for the last number of years very successfully. But that's been very much in collaboration with industry because we don't employ creatives, the industry does. We've got the policy levers to ensure that those kind of triggers happen, and we can do the same in terms of diversity, and whether that's for people with disability, people from regional areas, people from culturally diverse backgrounds, people who identify as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, and in New South Wales' case, people from Western Sydney as well. They're all underrepresented in our programs, and we've done a lot of research and deep diving over numerous years to see where our applications are coming from, who's getting the money, who's not getting the money and why, and then working to do, whether it's attachment schemes, career development, working with organisations to say, well, how can we work with you? What do you need us to do? Do you need, is it brokering relationships? And working with the broadcasters to make sure that they know about people in Western Sydney and they know the creatives that we're talking to who are looking for careers in this industry. Because that's also one of the things. Everybody's so busy, they're head down, resources are very modest and becoming even tighter everywhere in this industry as well. So if we can help in that by introducing people and making sure that people are being employed, that's the key. It worked for the gender, it was about it's who you employ. The same as here. We've got so many talented people across all of those underrepresented areas. They need jobs. And that's what it comes down to, is you just need to look at who you're employing.
Anybody else want to add anything? Great.
I think one of the things we've really noticed through our First Nations screen strategy in particular, but also across the board when it comes to looking at, you know, something Alex mentioned, which is, you know, who tells the stories, you know, who's actually telling this story. And I think the big key that we've kind of identified that we want to focus on is enabling more producers from diverse backgrounds or from these sort of diverse communities, because at the end of the day, you know, it's fantastic to have crew or writers or directors, you know, from diverse backgrounds, but it's also about who's sort of controlling the business of the story, you know, and we really want to enable that to be controlled by the people who are best placed to tell that story.
Yeah, I just
can I just oh, sorry. Can I just add in? I can't remember who said it about pathways, and we've taken a slightly different approach in that we're a very small jurisdiction, and we're having better, I think, success in like working with a smaller number of people, and really making sure that the experience that they have is something that's really going to drive their career. For example, we had somebody who we were able to get an attachment on in Sydney with SBS on a production that was actually from Canberra. And in the end, what happened, we were able to negotiate a 1-year full contract with Wild Bear for this particular person after the event. Now, of course, that's moved this girl's career along in a great way. Yeah. And so for us personally in these smaller jurisdictions, I guess we can do that a little bit more because we know the individual players, and we just find that's working a lot better than a initiative per se.
Okay, I'm just also hearing now from ACMI that the feed is cutting in and out. So, but we're going to keep going and see how it works. Okay, so sorry, I'm actually a bit distracted. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm now going to go to the questions. I'm going to rattle through a whole bunch of these questions. Okay, games and interactive is still under-supported by the screen agencies. Big statement across Australia, especially Screen Australia. I don't know if that's true. But given that digital games are more COVID resistant, what is that going to be a priority, more of a priority for the future?
Can I speak to this one, Denise?
You can, Kate.
So I'm very pleased to say that in South Australia, you know, the government here has definitely recognised the resilience of the game development sector, and also the sort of the you know, the economic potential of that sector. It is a $180 billion sector globally. So that is a huge industry. And from our point of view, the benefits of investing in the game sector are very similar to investing in the screen sector. It's a South Australian IP, it's South Australian jobs, it's high-tech, highly paid jobs, highly transferable skills into the screen sector. So we've actually introduced a 10% games rebate. It's a 10% rebate that operates similarly to the 10% PDV rebate we have in South Australia, but it's for eligible expenditure on game development activities. So we're really excited about that. We've just put out our guidelines.
Great, well done.
To the industry for feedback and consultation. And yeah, I welcome anyone from around Australia to have input into those guidelines, because they are a bit of a test case. This is sort of a first in Australia. So we want to get it right and make sure that we're setting the template for this to hopefully broaden out into other states and federally as well.
Coming to you, Willie, but I'm just going to ask Caro to feed into that, because I mean, games is a really important part of the slate here in Victoria.
It is. It is a significant amount, and we know that from Kate's comment around what the industry is worth globally, it's actually growing faster than traditional film and television content globally as well. So in 4 years, it's going to be worth 320 from your 180. So the rapid growth of games globally, we need as Australia to take a hold of that. And currently, from a federal point of view, we are not. We don't have a federal games rebate. We need one, and we need someone to take control of games investment from a national level as well. From a state perspective and Victoria's perspective, we absolutely echo South Australia's commitment to games and digital games, and we can see the convergence of the same type of skills between writing and developing narrative stories to how games are developed. So we can see this beautiful crossover between the creativity, the technology, the innovation, and certainly it is jobs for the future. So we've got to get our act together and develop a national policy and for states to support that as well.
Who did I say? Go, Sally, and then Alex.
I was just going to say, from a federal point of view, we used to do games, and we don't. It's not that we don't think they're important, but our funding was removed, and you know, it's not. I'm sure we'd love it if it came back, but we don't know. There are probably other priorities.
Okay, Alex, go for it, and then Willie, I think you wanted to say something too.
Was actually going to say, I think it's probably worth pointing out here that I don't think Screen Australia is actually has the discretion to invest in games. So Sally sort of covered it. I completely agree with Caro. The question of where games is at is in a really interesting place, because those of us who are around this Zoom chat know exactly how valuable this sector is and how popular it is and how much money there is in it. But not everybody that makes the decisions about where budgets come from and where budgets go necessarily understand that. And it's those of us who are in states whose governments are supporters, as I am lucky enough to be, we're very lucky, but not every jurisdiction around the country is actually in that privileged position. So I think to go back to the actual guts of your question, yeah, we agree that absolutely games are fundamental and they're important and need to be supported more, and they're great and they're wonderful, but the sector does actually still have a job to do to get that point across to the decision makers of budgets.
Willie, and then yes, I can see you, Kylie.
I'll just be very, very, very
yes, please.
brief and
that would be great.
Echo that the work that Victoria and South Australia have done recently is fantastic, and SAFC has done some wonderful stuff in the game space, and I'm looking on with great envy. But what we're finding locally is that the traction that is happening around the country in games is now being picked up, I think, jurisdictionally elsewhere, and our government here is all of a sudden fully on board. Not all of a sudden, they've been interested, and we ran a small pilot last year just to highlight what can happen, and it was highly successful. So we think that there's great opportunity in Western Australia, and are now working closely with our funder on this.
Go, Kylie.
I'll unmute, sorry. We just recently opened up our games funding to be year round rather than in round. So it's open all year round now for games developers to apply for. But I also wanted to mention the initiative that was announced this week by all of the agencies, the short film initiative, yes, partnering with Epic Games and Unreal, the games engine, which is a really generous and exciting and very innovative initiative, partnering games development and the power of that Unreal Engine, which of course was used to create the series The Mandalorian. So it just demonstrates the crossover and why our industries are closely aligned, and you know why we should be paying very close attention to what's happening in the games world and how it can benefit everyone in the screen ecosystem.
Thank you. I'm just looking at questions. I mean, I've got to ask this question because people ask me this all the time and comment on this all the time in our industry. We don't actually have a very supportive federal government right now, do we? In the sense, I'm sorry, I've just got to pull that elephant out of the room and go, if you're part of like infrastructure, how are you guys all going to lobby in the future to see if we could perhaps do a little bit better? Or is that like,
I think the federal government would say, look, I think the federal government would say they are supportive. If you look at, they've just put down $400 million onto the table. That's a really significant investment in our sector. And if you look at all of the different aspects of the way that the federal government support the sector that were outlined in the options paper, it adds up to a really considerable sum. What I think we need to think about as agencies and as an industry is we tell the production attraction story really, really well. And I think we need to bring the story of the value of investing in Australian owned IP and what that delivers back to us. You know, I think that we've got to put all of the pieces together, because the screen production industry is, you know, we deliver so many different types of benefits, I suppose, to the government, and we've gotten really good at telling one or two of those, and we need to put all of the benefits together and tell that story better.
And I think too, the onus is on the industry to articulate their story of value. It's not up to Screen Australia to advocate to their government. We can assist with data and insights and cobbling together the right story, but really it's a call out to the industry to come together and articulate, as Kate said, a very simple strategy for what do they want. The options paper was a vehicle for that, and 300 applications hopefully will attest to that and maybe show some trend and alignment.
There's another question coming which says quotas. They've been put on hold till the end of the year. And the question is, how do you fight them so that, we've discussed a lot of this before, I guess, but, you know, that's obviously a real concern out there about quotas.
Well, there's a concern out there for quotas by the free-to-air broadcasters that are advocating very, very strongly not to have them. I wouldn't think that anyone here on this Zoom call would disagree with me to say that we feel very strongly that they need to be maintained and that they need to be reintroduced urgently, and it can't be extended. The loss of quotas will kill our local television industry.
Does anybody else want to add anything to that? Bang on, beautifully said. Okay, where are the jobs?
Well said, Caro.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Here's another question. Where are the jobs? There aren't enough jobs. How are subsidies to overseas companies going to lead to sustainable employment? I think we sort of covered that, but does anybody want to, because by having production, albeit overseas production, you are generating a lot of employment in the country. Is there anything else that needs to be said in answer to that question?
I think that just demonstrates why the quotas are essential as well, as Caro says, because that creates the jobs, that supports the industry and gives us a viable export industry as well, which just keeps feeding back into itself.
And as a state-based screen agency, our focus is on the screen industry in Western Australia and in enabling jobs in Western Australia for West Australian production, particularly to start with. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and we're the same way in the NT. But I think also to have a look at the value of those international productions. If you don't have a local industry that's really skilled up and has the capabilities, then people just don't travel, you know, to Australia just for a studio in a location. They travel here because you've got really great crews, and it's really important that they're employed. And I think they're part of the holistic ecosystem that we have in Australia.
Okay, thank you. Coming back to what you said before, Sally, considering that 90% of documentaries have been able to continue in some form during this time, will the various funding bodies to the cinema form as opposed to television consider boosting funding to this before the larger productions are able to resume? So in other words, more funding now to documentary, which can continue more easily?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, some documentaries may disagree, but they said 90% have kept going. I think our applications to documentary have pretty much tripled, and you know, and that's not to say there's some very good ones in there. So it's been quite tough in one sense, but I think we feel fairly confident that documentary is still going to be strong and still going to be some great docs made. But we're not particularly changing the funding at the moment.
Okay, cool.
It's also interesting that in terms of the COVID budget support fund that we've set up, we've had very few applications so far from documentary, mainly all from TV and feature.
And so that's an indication that they're continuing with their
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Probably once they wake up to the fact the fund's there, they might think, well, we could, well, why don't we? And that's fair enough. Maybe it's a good case for that.
But read the guidelines online first. Don't give you a ring, Sally.
They're very exciting.
No, they're stunning. They're beautiful.
Do it right after the call. They're great.
Okay, a couple of quickies here. What was the name of the film that was made with the mother in the apartment that somebody
Cancelled. It's on Facebook. Look on Luke Eve's Facebook.
What was it called again?
Cancelled, like the wedding cancelled.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, cool. And are productions sharing their COVID plans for others to see? Oh, this is a good question. Would love to see every Clouds Eden COVID plan. Probably not.
As I said, everything's bespoke, but generally, I mean, I'll take an example of 5 Bedrooms 2, which resumed shooting. I think that Carol know better than me. I can't remember. They had to shut down, and they had about 10 days left.
Yeah.
And so it was one of the first ones to get going. And Andy Walker, who's the producer on that, was just great. You know, he said, you know, they had a great plan, but of course we haven't done this before. So he said almost every day it was a curveball thrown at him, and they just pivoted and innovated and rewrote bits. And there are scenes that I think will, in the future, will all say, "Oh, I think that was a COVID film," because there's quite a lot of back of head shots where they couldn't get the real the actor and actress.
A lot of air kissing. A lot of air kissing. I just watched. Sorry, you go. Sorry, Sarah.
So I was just saying, and Andy and others that we know have been very, very generous. The ones that have got back into production have been very, very generous with what they've learned, and very generous for sharing with us so that we could improve advice that we can give. So, which again is very heartening to see.
I just saw the most bizarre thing. I was watching it amongst my, hours and hours of binging on Netflix, etc. The Blacklist, which is an American TV series. And they started the episode and all of a sudden it stopped, and the actors in there, just like we're doing now on the Zoom call, start talking to the audience to say, well, we filmed that bit when pre-COVID, and now COVID's hit. So we're just trying to finish the episode. We're making this into the finale for the season. So 4 episodes they were trying to put into one, and they animated most of it. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. It was like animation and really bad sort of robot animation. And then with the scenes that they'd shot in between. So to Victoria and to New South Wales and Queensland, if you've managed to finish your productions with live action, you're doing better than America's doing. So well done. Check it out. It's so bizarre.
There's something I'd throw in here. I think when it comes down to the question of COVID safe plans, I think sometimes producers might be overthinking it. Because when it gets down to it, it's really just basic risk assessment. What's the risk? How are you going to mitigate it? What's the residual risk? It's actually that simple, but the complexity comes from the various myriad different places where you have to apply that question. And I think that's where the great value of the screen industry protocols that were put together is so strong, because it breaks down how that situation can apply in various different departments particularly. And I think that's where sharing other projects' COVID safety plans may not actually help, because they are so specific and, as been said before, so bespoke. Producers need to be able to assess their own risks, but don't be scared to talk to people, because we've all read them. We've all read a lot of them.
And I'm sure SPA as a resource would be helpful in that regard. And certainly any of our screen agency personnel will be available to share the learnings that we've experienced over the last few months now.
And there are also a lot of resources on the...
Go, Grania, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's a lot of resources on the WorkSafe Australia and WorkSafe websites for the different states as well. And of course, Kate and SAFC have shared the risk assessment plan, which is massively helpful if you're kind of, because it can be quite overwhelming, I think, to think, well, we've got this now what do we do with all of these restrictions? And because, you know, things is very fluid and things are changing every day. And it feels like all the rules are changing every day and shifting, and it's quite hard to kind of get a landing. But I think that risk assessment template is a very good grounding for what do I need to think about. The COVID safe guidelines that are on the Screen Australia website, which have got getting an update at the moment, I think, Sally. You know, that's a really good place to start because it does tell you exactly what you need to consider. But if you've got particular areas of concern, have a look at WorkSafe Australia and have a look at, you know, WorkSafe New South Wales or whatever your respective state might be.
Look, we're out of time, but I do want to go around one more time. Says she about to cough again. I have asthma. I haven't got COVID, it's asthma. I want to know what's the big learning that you've taken so far? Everybody's had to learn so much in the last few months, and there's been all sorts of things like rounds have been kept open for longer. You know, there's all sorts of learnings that you can see, and we haven't, you know. So I'd like to go around the traps, and I'm going to end with Carolyn because she's our proud partner in this, and I'm going to give her the most time to think about it. That's called a bit
I thought I was the underdog here, you know, under COVID for lockdown.
No, we're the Victorian girls. We're fighters. Don't you worry about that. So I'm going to actually start in New South Wales. Granny, what have you taken out of the last 3 months that you're going to take ahead with you?
I think how resilient the industry is and how quickly it innovates and pivots and looks for an opportunity, both for production companies, but also to share that with freelancers in the industry. We put a lot of money into development and opened a slate development round, initially with $700,000, which was, you know, pulled together from all the different funds because we didn't have extra money like most other people. And we've actually just announced 1.7 million today for 18 companies. That's 56 projects that are going into development off the back of that. And that's really, you know, production companies bringing in 3 or 4 projects to get some money on. And the number of writers and people that are going to be involved in that is brilliant. But it does show you how busy people are and how much work they want to do. I think we've moved very quickly from a panic and, oh my God, what's going on? Initially through to, okay, it is what it is. What are we going to do about it? And moving through into let's just keep business moving in whatever way we can until we can start shooting again. So I'm just in awe of people being able to do that without losing their cool too much and staying positive and keeping things moving and just trying to work out what it is they can do. As you know, we talked about the US being shut down. I mean, you know, I've heard that the Actors Guild there doesn't want people working until there's a vaccine. So there's an opportunity both for Australian content to go onto those streaming platforms internationally, because in a year's time there is going to be a backlog of there's no new content. So we do have an opportunity here to fill some of that, both with our local stories and also some of that service stuff for international production too.
Thank you. Monica, go for it. Oh, put your microphone on.
I was going to say, ditto, Grania stole some of my great words or got to use them first. So I wrote down things like pivot. I think pivot is the word that we seem to be using every day. We have to change tack as if we're, you know, in the Sydney to Hobart race. Resilience, I think it's resilience within our own organisations, but also trying to build resilience in our local industries. And sometimes that comes down to a phone call on a case-by-case basis with people who aren't doing well. I consider this a big time of innovation, and I consider it to be a transformational opportunity. I think, you know, wasn't it invention is the motherhood of necessity? Or I think I got that right.
Is the mother of invention.
The other way around, yeah. But you know what I mean. See,
I do know what you mean.
I'm doing it the other way around. But you know, it's just we've gotten over that initial shock. We are putting, you know, money, time, effort into development. Everybody's doing that. It makes sense. We often don't have enough time for development, and we rush development. Well, man, we've got the time now. So hopefully out of that comes some great work.
Great.
And once again, the opportunity to work with everybody has been fantastic.
Brilliant. Okay, Kylie, you're next.
I think I've just been so proud of the Screen Queensland team throughout this, everyone just really wanted to respond to support the film, TV and games industry. And what I think we've learned is to listen. It's to listen to the industry, to listen to the creatives in our state, to listen to our colleagues in other states, because people are telling us what they need. So we need to listen to that and react accordingly. And as we all know, we're not out of the woods, not by any stretch. So we have to keep listening and adapting.
Thank you. Perfect. Sally.
I can't really add much to that. I suppose one of the other things that I found interesting is the effect on distribution of coronavirus, and it's taken a pandemic to do something about some of the windows between theatrical and streaming, PVOD and things like that. And I mean, I don't know how long it will last, but I think again it's a sign of innovation and a sign of people finally being flexible in a strange environment like this. And it's also heartening, shout out to Stan, who've been picking up a lot of film, rather than, so it's a new form of distribution. I think a lot of us will be sad if the cinema isn't quite what it used to be, but I guess if there is a better home for it, or a home for it that wasn't there before, that's something we'll try and see as a silver lining.
Yeah, thank you, Kate.
All right, just unmuting myself there. I mean, look, actually, most of what I was thinking of has been covered. I mean, I think innovation and the opportunity for looking at new production methodologies, virtual production, I think is something that's going to be really interesting to arise out of this, the restrictions that we have on us at the moment. But also, I think it's just really supporting productions all the way, like it's just that sort of, our team as well has been really motivated by being able to respond to what industry need right now. And I think it's about making sure that we, when we back a production, we absolutely back them no matter what. Because I think if the last few months has taught us anything, it's just that, none of us can predict what's going to happen. I think that's going to fundamentally shift our mindset as people and as a community. And, we've already started on planning, for second waves and all sorts of scenarios, because I just don't think any of us know where this is going to end. So we just have to try and be as prepared as possible.
Thank you. Perfect. Jenny, nice and short. I think we're running out of time.
I think everyone's covered everything, but I just add another thing with have a collaborative environment. I think that collaboration, whether it be with my wonderful colleagues in the other screen agencies and all the rest of it, and with our own filmmakers, I think is really, really important. So really that strong collaboration, but everything else, ditto, ditto, ditto.
Love it. Long may the collaboration continue. Willie.
What it's shown, I think, for us is you can be flexible and you can do anything if you set your mind to it. And we've had to say, yes, we can do that, rather than, I don't know about that. So that's a really fantastic mindset for us going forward. And I think it's critical, and everything else that everyone said, yes, I agree 100%.
Love your work. Alex, thank you.
Obviously, I agree with everything everyone said before. Two other things I've learned. Firstly, the collaboration within government, I think, is really valuable. And we've all done it in the agencies of working with people from various other portfolios, and how important that can be, and how those perspectives can really make a difference in decision making. And secondly, I've also learned it's a really good time to live on an island with a moat.
Half your luck. Caro, yours is the final floor. You've probably listened to them all nicking your lines, but I'm sure knowing you've got something to add.
Look, I think for every screen agency, the key is to be accessible, for the industry to feel confident that they can reach out to us at any time. Yes, please read the guidelines on the website first. But, I really echo Kylie's point around listening, but we have to be accessible. We cannot be intimidating as agencies. We cannot hide behind walls of guidelines and rules and regulations. If we are to be agile, if we are to be proactive, if we are to help our local industry thrive, then that accessibility is really, really important. And the other thing is, let's roll up our sleeves, or at least put our bathers on and keep swimming. We've got to keep swimming. And as soon as we stop, that's when we sink. And so that takes a hell of a lot of energy and resilience and commitment to the jobs. But I can't speak more highly of my my colleagues here in the CEOs in the agencies and working with Screen Australia and Sally. We are here to ensure that Australia remains relevant in a global landscape of screen, that we are growing, that we are thriving, and that we retain our excellent culture here as a nation.
Perfectly put. I feel like doing a big round of applause. Oh, look, Kylie's leading the way. Well done, everybody. Look, it's been magic talking to you all tonight. I've just loved every bit of it, and I do hope that we can do it all again, even if it's not in COVID. But I want to thank you all for your generosity in giving up your evenings. And thank you for all of the amazing work you're doing for the community. I know that people out there will be thrilled. I'm sorry there's a whole bunch of questions we didn't get to, but in the end, they had so much to say that was so fascinating. I'm sure we covered everything. Don't forget to sign up for our, subscribe to this YouTube channel if you're watching, because there's another one along next month. And I think, just as a little tip, we might have all of the streamers. So it could be quite a good conversation again. But in the meantime, thank you so much, everybody. All the very best. Keep fighting. And I'm going for a swim. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.